KSP.bet. Watch and bet live.
Okay, this is episode 3 of League's Next World Champion. A show title that actually might end up being inappropriate, because at the moment, Korea's fucking dumpster fire. But in light of that, who have I brought on? The only man who understands when someone who's a pro player moves a champion, why they moved that champion. A lot of you guys know they moved the champion. You can understand empirically what happened, but you don't know why, do you? You don't know why they moved the character that way and the mechanics and such. But we have someone in our midst who claims to know as much. So we'll get into that as we go on the show. Obviously, Emily, usual co-host, going to be on all of them. If you haven't figured out, I don't just look at the Reddit comments and go, oh, time for a new co-host. You're fired. Get out. Like, obviously, don't do that, do I? There wouldn't be any logical reason why I would do that. So we're here for week 3. We've got our first guest. And here's the thing, Emily. I've worked you up slowly. I've let you just have a couple of episodes where you just, there's not too much pushback. I try to tease out some interesting things for you. But do understand right now that LS will probably say some shit that you don't agree with. Probably say some shit that no one agrees with. So you have to ask yourself, when do I push back? When do I debate? When do I engage with what he's saying? And when do I just let him go? Because you know what? Some of those missiles, you let them go in the sea. Not all of them are going to hit, so you don't have to defend everyone. You don't. Listen, I'm sort of pulling back the curtain again here, because I'm not necessarily actually talking to you here, but just anyone who's a female who might be a co-host. You don't have to address everything someone says, and/or tell us if you agree. You can just tell us your opinions as well. See, the secret there is you got to put some breadcrumbs out there. And occasionally, people pick them up, the right people. So let's start the show. LS, obviously the guest, as I referred to before. Right, LS, at the top of the show, let's just start here. Right, when you were coming into this season of LCK, and you knew that, like, for example, SK Telecom didn't make any big roster signings, KT kept the same squad, Samsung kept the same squad, or KT technically brought in some subs, but like Samsung kept the same squad. The only team that was one of the big teams that really made a big move was Peanut goes to the team that's Kingzone Dragon X now, which obviously sort of name up your fucking alley. It sounds like a title of a fucking manga on your bookshelf right now. But anyway, when you saw like what the top end of LCK looked like, what were your expectations for the season coming in?
I thought SK Telecom would end up moving down to like 4th, 5th, which is what I think that they'll end up later on in the year. But I think that's where they're at right now, realistically, skill-wise, even though their record doesn't reflect that. I think that they downgrade in top. I think that the game is evolving at a rapid pace, and other people are just getting better and catching up. And so what made SKT stand out and be better is starting to fall apart. And then I think that the meta is just in a also pretty awkward place. And then also, they've had some really bad runs, like games that they just never should have lost. But I think SKT's roster pound for pound is really weak. I made a tweet about that as well. Okay. Outside of Faker. I think that Bang is a shadow of his former self. I think that Wolf has been consistently overrated for a really long time. I think that Blank can't really... Blank has always been like this mid-range jungler. He's not like super impressive. There was that like phase where it was like 20-0 or something. He's undefeated. That's great. But realistically, if you just watched him play, it's not because of him that record is created, or not entirely. Thal has been extremely lackluster. He's a bottom tier top laner in LCK. Huni in that regard was better. They lost out on the opportunity maybe to get Marin back. And then Faker, this meta sucks. It's pretty hard on mid laners for like a lot of reasons, if other players in the game know how to actually play. So I think that's the spot SKT's in right now. I think that they're like destined for 4th, 5th.
Right, Emily, let's just talk about SKT then. Come on then. What do you think of some of what LS has said there? Is there anything that's jumping out to you?
I think the mid lane meta is actually huge, because we see a lot of... So not just something like a Ryze or a Malzahar where he can initiate or kind of control team fights a bit more, but and the lane itself. But we've seen I think actually Jin Air is going to have an issue unless some of their mid laners improve, but they're fine right now because the meta doesn't punish you for having a subpar mid. I think you can see something similar with, even though I think he's performing better individually, but Pawn, I think you can see it reflected in some of the picks that you see a team like Rocks pulling out with Lava, who again, like, not a top tier mid laner in Korea. No offense, Lava. But he's pulling out like Galio. He pulled out the Corki just to have mid control and just constantly be pushing. And we're seeing some more. So as the meta has evolved across this patch, and we have one more week on the patch, we've seen a lot more Galio bans for obvious reasons, because you can just lock in Galio and you can control the mid lane, you can control the side lanes. And if you have a team that's smart enough to be able to communicate well and be like, okay, we have this composition where we don't necessarily have to have like a incredibly strong mid laner. You've seen a lot of teams play around that. Like I said, Rocks, I think, is actually a really good example of a team that's just been drafting around their own strengths to cover up their weaknesses. And it has worked out okay for them. So that's the thing I kind of latch onto too, because even when SKT has not performed as well in the past, I think you've always had Faker there, right? Mm-hmm. And I think it's a lot more difficult now for him to be that carry. And we've also seen a few, so I don't know if LS is going to agree with this, but we've seen a few like weird moments from him where he is just not on the same page. It's kind of an expansion from some of his teleports from last year, which were really bad. Towards the end of like midsummer, end of summer, I think, is where you just kind of were like, Faker, what was that teleport? Like, what are you doing? Mm-hmm. But we've seen him get caught out. We've seen him get caught shopping. Just like really weird, like individual mistakes that I don't know if it's because he's trying to communicate with the team at the time or something's going on in team comms or what, but that has been really weird to see as well, which is also not a good thing for SKT either. But I actually agree with him that they'll end up 4th or 5th as well. So
yeah. The thing on Faker that's super interesting is it reminds me of the time period, I want to say it was summer season 6, where he just looked tilty. Like he looked very off character. And I mean, it's a frustrating thing, right? When you basically know that your teammates are worse, right? Or that something's just going wrong. And then you're overextending, you're mispositioning because you're desperate. You're looking to get edges that require your opponents to make mistakes. Because it's like you need that to win to compensate for disadvantages elsewhere. And I mean, you can see that in solo queue. That happens in solo queue with players. They'll make more, they'll make higher risk plays, or they'll do something that requires the opponent to have an error in order for it to be good. And if they do have the error, it's gigantic. And he's doing this very often, actually, like in his movement. I remember one of the Azir games, it was very similar, like just going too far forward, obviously looking for just poke damage that realistically the opponent can consent to just not allowing it to happen, but he's looking for it, and even getting into those positions puts him in danger. And I know everyone knows that he knows that that's the case, but it's like he feels obligated to look for this stuff. Or other times, like you said, he just looks hopeless or like helpless. Like, just get me out.
And it also sucks because so effort is just new. And so regardless of what you want to say about his play, like he has had some very obvious like mispositioning errors in team fights or miscommunication, which is just something I would expect, honestly, of a rookie support. And then Tall, who...
Well, here's the thing. Let's talk about that for a second, though, Emily, because I think one thing that was very telling to me was when we had that first week where they tried Wolf as a jungler, I said to you, it's not even to me about whether or not he'll be a jungler again. It's that this implies to me he will not be coming back as a support player. Like this move right now where they've just kept effort in the entire time, no matter even if he has a bad game, remember, that is not what Korean teams, and especially not what SK Telecom does. If you are the rookie who gets put into the team as the starting player at the beginning of the match, as soon as you lose the game, you come out. That's just always been the way that they run it. So the fact that Wolf has just literally disappeared in a black hole now tells me that based on probably something in scrims, he's never coming back. Like, unless this goes really, really bad and effort's so bad that they have to try something, I think Wolf's just done. It looks like it.
Or they're just like really stuck on maybe continuing to practice him in jungle, because I'm not sure if I said this last week, but this week I got to talk to Hooney a bit about it at LCS, and I asked him, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I knew they were practicing it because this isn't something they started just before the season; it's something they had practiced previously as well." So that tells me also that they're not going to put Wolf back in the support position. And for whatever reason, they really want him to either develop as a jungler or be a jungler that can maybe come in when Blank isn't performing well, because they kind of have always had that jungle thing where the second jungler comes in. And at this point, I don't even know if it's a play style thing as much as it is a like clear the team mindset kind of thing. But that's going to be an issue for them, because even though Blank historically had a good record against like Score, for example, right? Like we said, it'd be really telling if they put Wolf jungle in against Score and against Peanut. And obviously they didn't, but like Score, like especially it was game 3, I think, eviscerated Blank. Really, like it was a really good jungle performance from him. So that is another thing that's super concerning, especially with the way they've rotated 2 jungle players for the past few years.
Okay, what do you think on that, LS, the jungle problem? Here's the thing, for SK Telecom, it's basically everyone except Faker we have to talk about.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, like I said, Blank has always just been basically like this mid-range solid jungler that's nothing standout, nothing fantastic. And Wolf moving into jungle, first off, I don't understand all the hype around it or like the excitement or whatever. If you understand the game, you can move into that. And he's been a part of the team pretty fucking long. So obviously he's going to have a pretty good idea of what to do, especially if he's being micromanaged, which he likely is. So I agree with you that if he has gone suddenly from support to jungle, that it is probably telling that he doesn't go back to support. Unless like him and Bang just need like a break away from each other. I don't know. It's sort of like the Mata like and Imp fighting. Yeah, like Mata and Imp or something way back in the past. But then, later down the line, they, claimed that they wouldn't be opposed to working together again. I don't know. I mean, there's just so much like, there's so much shit just going wrong for SKT. And it's like, I don't know how it's trying to be patched up and fixed behind the scene. Effort can probably be brought up to par. I think when the meta changes a little bit, it'll favor SKT a little bit more as long as it gets opened up and then Faker has more control and whatnot. But I don't think their issues are jungle support.
So here's another problem as well. Is like another reason maybe why they took Wolf out is maybe they had the logic of like, oh, he's part of the problem in that bot lane. If you give Bang a different type of player, maybe he'll be different. But, well, we've seen now what happens. Nothing changed. Like he's still doing really fucking badly. If anything, he'd be worse than last year. So I mean, I have to say, I always found it. Everyone knows my opinion on. Well, they don't actually know my opinion on Bang because they just take the Wolf opinion and cross apply it to Bang. I've never said that ever. But I always thought he was like a good AD carry who got a little bit overrated as being like some hard carry fucking Uzi Eye guy who he never was. And the reason why that used to tilt me is the only teams in which people raved about Bang were the teams where they had like world-class top laner as well as Faker. So every other lane's just filled up already, and then the job of the AD carry half the time is just wait until fucking 25 minutes before you have to do anything. So I never understood why people used to rave about Bang. Then we've seen him now for a season and a half, well, not quite a season and a half, but like more than a season or so now, without a really good top laner. And he's been fucking garbage. Well, what are the odds of that? What a coincidence that is. What has the universe just made me look like I was right all along? Well, bloody hell, why has that happened again? What do you think Bang's issue is? Like, because remember, the reason I'm setting it up like that is if you listen to the guy's rep, he's supposed to be super good AD carry, always performs. Cool, well, if we got him and Faker, no problem. Yeah, the top lane's gone to shit, jungle's not that good, but we still got the 2 carries, no problem. We can win some games.
Yeah, Bang doesn't stand out as like a power carry. Like he's the guy that I think that you like rely on in a way. Like one of the things that I think a lot of pro players and myself included always credited Bang for is he doesn't really misstep a lot in terms of like he's not going to be the reason that you lose, but he's not necessarily going to be the reason that you win.
Yes.
Like there's very few instances he's going to be the reason that you win.
Here's the
he's a super solid rock.
This is where people always thought for some bizarre reason that I was dissing Pobelter, but it was actually in a weird way a compliment. That's basically what I've always seen Pobelter's role as. It's like he's an NA player who plays mid. Bear in mind, there's nearly none that are good. And he can play it, maybe not a world-class level, but in the West, he can get you. The whole point is, if he plays against Bjergsen or he plays against whoever else the really good mid laner is, fucking Perks, he's not going to be the reason you lose the game because he gets so mismatched by the other mid laner. Like, to me, like on the Korean level, that's what Bang always was. It's like the whole point is, by always doing like good to average in his lane and in the game in general, it allows Faker and the top laner to win you the game.
Mm-hmm.
I think another huge issue is that Bang has never been, in my opinion, a strong laning AD carry. Like, even when people consider him at his best, right? Like, even if he's winning lane in CS, I don't see him as a super strong laning ADC that's going to get you a ton of advantages in lane. Like, he and Wolf have always preferred to kind of sit back, not even necessarily be the primary initiators, but rely on counter engage to win trades in bot lane. And then what Bang's always been known for is like his strong team fighting. Well, now with SKT, because people are targeting topside more because this meta has shifted, so you kind of have to target topside because bot side right now is still double relic shield, which is blah. And then you have SKT. Even when they're trying to sit back and team fight, they either A, don't have the composition to go up against the opponent's composition in a strong team fight, like we saw from some of their games against KT, but then also you have other people misplaying the fight so that even if Bang's positioning is like super good, because he is like, I think, a very fairly consistent AD carry in that regard. Like, he has good team fight positioning, and SKT over the past few years has been known as a very strong late game team fighting team, and that has also fallen apart because you have like top lane getting sometimes like absolutely crushed early, or you have Faker not able to affect the map as much. You have just like they're falling apart in team fights as well, which is something that I think is also really unfortunate for Bang, because if he's going to shine specifically, I think it's through team fight positioning.
Okay, here's the other thing. You can be the third or fourth best team in a league and still have a crack at winning the tournament, you know. Like, for example, maybe you're the third or fourth best team, but you have a really great matchup against the second best team, you know. There can be all sorts of factors. Or you're not that good as a team, but you have a couple of star players who sometimes go off. These are all great reasons as to why you could win. This SK Telecom looks like not only will they be fourth, but bearing in mind how the playoffs work in LCK, they're not going to the finals. Like, how the fuck would they? You literally have to go through all the best teams. So, like, right now, remember, we said this is the week that would tell us because they played KT Rolster and they played KSV. And KT beat them. And if I'm KT, I can't even be happy that I finally beat SK Telecom because this is fucking garbage. Like, the way KT played wasn't fucking great. League of Legends. They can't be like, "Whoa, we beat them," because you know what? They're a great team and we finally overcame them. This is like, it almost feels like you feel like you've been robbed of your victory that you wanted after all these years because you won and it's like, oh, well, we won because they're fucking terrible now. How is that even a victory? Like, after these two games I saw here, like, I don't know what hope there is left for SK Telecom.
I mean, KT made the same exact mistakes that they came in, right? And I said this last week too, after I saw them week one. I was like, oh, they're making exactly the same mistakes that they made last year. Even though they came in, they're like, we have better coordination now, we have better, etc. And we saw them making the same mistakes even in that SKT series. And then Kingzone, you had the first game where all SKT kind of had to do was sit back and set up for Baron. And they didn't do it. Like, and it was really frustrating to watch, I guess.
Okay, let me ask you this then, LS. Let me speculate for me, or theory craft. So one of the things I've always been puzzled by is that and they're not even talking shit. If I took some of the people who I consider experts about League of Legends and I had them watch a game and, like, obviously they're not playing the game, but commentate it live, so they don't know what's going to happen. A lot of them could tell me these things like, oh, this is very weird the way they're setting up here, or they've made a misread at this point. Why do you think in the game, a team like SK Telecom, where remember, 4 of the players in the game were in the team that was winning championships, was one of the best in Korea? How can you go so off the boil that you make all these misreads, even in the macro game?
That's honestly a good question. It really is. I think, like, the only thing I can imagine is that the comms get muddled and the hesitation, and you start second guessing yourself, or someone's off page. But, you know, like you're saying, there's multiple people on the team that have been together for so long. So how are these macro things not coming together? And then I have to wonder if it has to just do with in-game tilt. I mean, if you saw one of the ways that they lost one of the games to Kingzone, like the David versus that, I titled the VOD David versus Goliath.
It's like the 50-minute game.
Was that game 1?
It was like that was
with
game.
the really bad Baron
where there's no universe in the world where SKT can lose. Like, you could give them 99-1 odds and they should never lose. They managed to do it. They managed to fuck up, and it's like, how do you go from being SKT to that game? And just a pure macro, you could go into a coma and make the correct macro decisions. Like, that's how far ahead and simple the game was, and yet they couldn't just thread the needle. And it was the weirdest thing in the world. And all that I think that you can assume as a spectator looking in is that the comms are getting muddled. Maybe someone's calling for something, and then someone else is saying something else, and then it's causing hesitation or doubt. And if that goes on long enough, these super thin timings that are just a few seconds, like, you know, 2 or 3 seconds that you have to make the call or something, to be instantaneous, they're lost opportunity. And then it's rinse, wash, repeat. And then that just keeps going on long enough. And eventually it's no longer simple. Like, the game stage just reach something that's complex. I mean, that's my interpretation. That's the only thing I can imagine.
Right, let's
that's
move
where
on
I
then.
wonder.
Okay, come on.
Oh no, I was just gonna say, like, finally, that's kind of where I wonder how much of a voice Wolf has on the team, and perhaps that's another reason why they want him.
Oh, by the way, as well, like, listen, by the way, I'll just say at the top of the show,
he was the cheerleader.
I've had a bad time today, so I'm not going to be fucking holding back on this one. But you know, every interview that he gives, like, haha, I am the mood guy, I'm the bringing. You're doing a fucking terrible job. You're the fucking MVP for the other team, you moron. You're making them feel good, aren't you? Like, how about you actually do your fucking job? Get in there, paint your face with some rouge, you clown, and show us how to all have a good time. Because at the moment, all that we're doing is watching you not play games, and then we're all going, fuck, it's going really badly, this is the worst time of our careers, and you're just like, heh. Remember when I used to do all those jokes? Like, you're not doing it, are you? Like, remember, that's why one of the most overrated aspects is, like, a team that's already winning, and then they're like, oh, we're all friends, we all get along. Well, yeah, you fucking win all the time. There's no reason you wouldn't, would there? Like, I think it'd be really weird if you were winning every game and you were like, I hate that fucking guy. It's the teams that do really badly. That's where you really see what, like, the composition of the personalities is like. And quite frankly, SK Telecom, especially if you think of their history, the fact that they win so much, the fact that they have sort of like a justified arrogance that we should win. Like, they're a team where they are like TSM, where they're not allowed to lose a game. If they lose a game, something went wrong, right? Let's all scrutinize everything that happened in the game. That actually breeds a terrible environment when you start losing as many games as they're losing now. That's where you're going to get torn apart completely by your own teammates, by the fucking fans. It's going to be even harder for you than a team that's like, you know, a good team but just has an off week or something, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Especially with games going as long as they have. Like, I know that was something that people brought up with Afreeca, kind of like tilting in game 3 against KSV after game 2, is because if you're going like this is not only an SKT team that is like whatever, they might not have a good mood because they're losing, but then they're also, these games are going like 40 to 60 minutes. Like, they had that 95-minute game against Jin Air in week 1. Like,
that's
it's
what's
just
great as well. Like,
you absolutely need to have a strong mentality in order to survive that.
This is what's great, Emily, is that actually I'll even go ahead and say it. I reckon SK Telecom from last year were fucking who would win some of these games. Like, I think actually they'd eventually, like, you know, fucking find one opening, get the right team fight. You know, I think if you give them this many chances, that's why it's even worse right now, because they're playing all these super long games. Because at the moment, the amount, like, this isn't a coincidence, guys. These aren't the best games ever. It's just so hard to snowball the game right now in League. So it's almost like in the past, when you make the key mistake and the other team just wins the game, you can always give the excuse later, oh, it's just that one mistake I made. This is like you go into a fucking exam and you write in the answer and it's wrong, and then the answer just goes, well, you can have another go. And you go, okay, I'll try this. And then they go, another go. And at the end, you just literally just broken man just crying, going, I don't know, please, just let me go. I'm not worthy. Like, that's SK Telecom right now. Anyway, let's move it on, right? So let's talk then about the team that they played, KT Rolster. So as I said, and as I set up, Emily, if you finally beat SK Telecom, that should be the beginning of a great storyline. Like, oh, you've gotten things together. Now you beat SK Telecom, maybe you can win the league. Remember, that's what everyone's been saying for the last 2 years. Oh, as soon as SK Telecom slips up, we're right there. Rocks Tigers, we're going to win all the leagues. Oh, KT, we can win. Samsung, oh, we can do some stuff, right? After watching KT at the moment, have there been improvements? Have there been some areas where it's coming together?
I mean, against FKT, you saw them having really similar issues to what you've seen from this team in the past. Against BBQ, they had that Pawn Zoe game that was really weird and unfortunate, and it.
Listen, shout out to Pawn for showing that a champion that's 100% pick ban in every fucking region. When you get it, you can still lose on it. So congrats.
It's like
you're a special player, man.
But yeah, Korea took a while to pick it up because I think with Minion Dematerializer, she has better wave clear and stuff. But with Azir still pick ban, I think Korea was kind of hesitant to pick her up, but not anymore. Not after Edge this past week. So. But yeah, anyway, I haven't seen anything new or super improved out of this KT team, I guess is my point. It is frustrating for me because that's the one team I'm actually a fan of, right? I do think Score looked really good this week. I think he had some really smart jungle games. But I mean, it's the same thing been talking about for over a year with this team now, where they will make one random over aggressive error and get punished for it, as they should, and that will cost them a lot of advantages in game, and that's still the thing they need to fix, in my opinion.
Yeah, so the thing about KT is they basically there's micro improvements with each season, but it's all micro improvements in the areas where they were already strong. So watching them so far in spring, I mean, it almost looks identical to the same team, but some of the stuff is slightly more refined on a micro macro level, like team fighting or slight coordination. They have a ton of opportunity loss when it comes to either advanced map rotations or movements or opportunity to just capture certain things or go after certain thresholds in the game. And then, like Emily was saying, they just get these leads and then still can't manage to close with them, or they'll be overly aggressive for no reason. They'll play to what they want to do rather than what their opponent needs, in order to win. And I mean, there's a ton of teams in the world that are doing this. I talk about it all the time lately. Sometimes, the games reach this stage where the opposing team can only win if something occurs, and rather than the leading team say, okay, rather than what do we want to do, what does the opponent need to happen? They don't fucking do that. TSM doesn't do it. SKT, KT, fucking no one in the world does it right now. They just do whatever the fuck they want to do. And KT does that. And then if they ram against a door and something goes wrong in a fight, then they tilt, right? And then it's rinse, wash, repeat over and over. And then the same problem, at least it seems so, continues to plague them, where if they are even or they fall behind, they're a chicken with their head cut off. They don't know what the hell to do. It's they need advantages to appear good in a way. They're still strong individually, mechanically. So it's not they're completely dead in an even game, but they don't look nearly as impressive if they're even. And if they're losing, it's almost you expect them to just get blown out of the water, they just want to go next. Because they just, it's almost they scoff at the thought that they would ever get into such a position again.
What do you think about the dynamic in the team then? Because obviously the biggest problem in this team is, Like, you have Smeb and you have Deft, and I'm sure there's a team setup you could have where both could be the superstar players and it'd still work out, but it's not the way KT runs things. So what do you think the dynamic is in that sense?
I have no idea. I mean, you mean dynamic like personality? Like
put it this way, here's the difference, okay? Right, you know, whenever fans or players in interviews say, oh, we don't have a star player in our team, right? Go into any coaching meeting and listen to the scouting report. And if you think the fucking scouting report for every team is, oh, everyone on that team's really good, they win as a team, shut the fuck up. No, the scouting report
exactly.
is, this guy's the star player, he's going to do this at this point in the game, he's going to get these resources put into him, he's going to have jungle attention at this point in time, we're going to try and deny him these champions, when he has them, we're going to play them in this way. That's the way the whole thing works. And you know the reason why you know that's legit is because since the coach who's scouting against you wants to win, he's going to be brutally honest with that stuff. Right, here's the difference. I bet if you do the scouting report against KT and then you could like compare that against what KT thinks their win conditions are and what they're going to do, it feels like there'd be no matchup whatsoever. Like, I would like to know what they think that their team setup is. Like, how do they think they're going to win? Like, I wonder if this is even the thing they actually discuss, or whether they really do believe, like, oh, we've got all these good players, we don't need to think of anyone in this particular way. Because that's where I feel like that, to me, that's like step one of fixing things. Is like, you've got to sort of break them down to their essential elements and then rebuild correctly, you know. Interestingly enough, when I think of like certain teams, sometimes I just think of individual players and like how other players just orbit around them, and that's how the team functions. KT, I think of like one individual who's fused by like 5 personalities, like a fucked up, like demonically possessed person that is just overpoweredly strong, but there's so much internal conflict. Well, it's like a guy who's like got a really great vocabulary, but he's got Tourette's as well. So as he's talking, he's going, shut oh, fucking up. And you're like, whoa, that's really inappropriate. And then he's, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's what I think of. I think of KT as a sole entity, which is really weird in a way. I mean, the last thing I heard, which was like over a year ago, is that there was a ton of conflict between bottom lane and top lane, and that Score was just sort of not a part of it. And then Pawn's just sitting there like in the middle. I feel like KT would probably close out LCK, right? If the mid laner was better, right? Like if you replace it. Pawn on paper doesn't seem like he would be that bad because you have the carry up in top lane and then you have Deft and Mata in bottom lane, and Pawn just has to basically just be Pawn in mid. So on paper it looks okay. But the other thing, and it worries me for other teams in other regions, like I call Team Liquid the NA KT Rolster right now, because that's just how they appear to be, is when you're so strong mechanically and individually, and unlike fucking SK Telecom, KT actually has 4 competent human beings. So what ends up happening is even if you get into rough spots, you can wiggle your way out of it mechanically. You can muscle your way out of bad situations. How the fuck are you supposed to learn when you can get caught out, you can fuck up, and then you can just get out of it? Yes. And you don't ever have to really learn how to properly play. And I think this is going to actually potentially be like Team Liquid's downfall and like NA. But I feel like KT, it's like if they don't meet a super powerful opposition, they don't have to learn. And then you have to wonder, how stubborn are they? Like with personality, sort of like what you were saying, you know, what is their own self-evaluation of themselves? How do they really get forced to learn in a way? So I don't know. I honestly don't know what KT does. I think KT goes to Worlds this year, for sure. But I don't see...
The sick thing is, like, with the world the way it is right now, who knows, they could probably even fucking win, but it just wouldn't be good. It wouldn't be good for anyone, right?
Yeah. They just have so much that they could be better at. It's like, it's really interesting.
Okay, Emily, what's your theory on it?
I think, I mean... So
like,
one
okay,
thing,
let me ask you this: here, like, what if you came in tomorrow and you're the coach of KT Rolster?
Oh God!
And every player has to listen to you, and whatever you say, no matter whether it goes against what they think, they have to do it. What would like your top 3 things that should be changed tomorrow without changing any players? You got to keep the same lineup. What would you do? Like, what would you try to tweak?
Make sure Pawn is on something that he can't screw up. So if Galio's banned, put him on Corki. His Azir actually was not bad this past week. So try to focus on pushing lanes. I mean, I think honestly, like this is going to sound awful. My game plan would be really similar to what I think KT tried to do last year, which was draft strong lanes so that Score has pretty much free reign over the jungle because he's a very intelligent jungler. So due to his experience, he can respond to the opposing opponent, his opponent very well. Like, for example, against Blank, I think he had Blank tracked visually for like the first 10 minutes of game 3 or something ridiculous like that, where like he always knew where Blank was. They always had everything warded. And that's because a lot, Smeb was pushing up topside so he could ward river and topside jungle. And my game plan would be very similar, where I would just make sure that we have pushing lanes, like easy to execute team compositions. Actually kind of similar to, I'd also take a look at what, I'm sure we'll talk about later, but what Kongdoo did to beat KSV, which was putting together these basically like easy to execute team fight compositions, where if you have, 5 players that can kind of come together and fight it out, then you're going to end up winning. So that would be my plan for KT.
Because I have to say, like one of the things that would be in my top 3 would be like this. Okay, I'm going to solve everyone's shot calling problem today. The way I solve it is this. During the laning phase of the game, Score shot calls nearly all the game. Everyone does exactly what he says or based on whatever information he gives them. Mata can be this genius shot caller in a team fight. He can do that all day long. He's probably amazing at that. I'd have like a hard line at that, because that's a theory I have about this team as well. Like the problem is a bunch of the players aren't playing badly individually. So as a result, it's not that, like this player just was really good when we think of him in his past team and now he's not good and, unfortunate for KT. But like the thing that kills me is, how is it possible for Score to, in these shit games, to still have such a good game individually, but that to mean nothing to the game? That tells me something like, my speculation would be that he's the sort of guy who, you get a lot of people like this in life, they're very cerebral people themselves, but they don't have leadership qualities. So they're not the sort of person who can actually sort of enforce what they've figured out. So he might have a great read on the game or might have a good idea, but maybe he's not a super vocal guy. Maybe he's not the guy who says, when there's some dispute over what you should do, he says, we're doing this now. Maybe he's more like, he contributes an idea and then someone else says otherwise. And the reason why I think that might be the case in this team is because past versions of KT Rolster, going back like just the last couple of years, had way worse players than they've got now, but were way better and more cohesive teams. Well, guess what? Worse players and players who've accomplished much less than you are much more likely in Korea to listen to you. Whereas I wouldn't be surprised if in Score's world, he's like, I'm playing with Smeb, I'm playing with Mata. Like, these guys know what it means to win. It's like, well, they might, but in this particular scenario, you might have to be their leader, And if you're letting them lead the way, they're not doing a fucking good job right now. So I feel like that's a factor in itself. But obviously, pure speculation. I can't actually know what's going on in the team. But it does just seem bizarre.
You're not Reddit?
The jungler could be this good, and then the team could be that bad as a team. Like, that shouldn't even be possible.
I mean, so LS might be able to attest to this a bit more, but from what little I know of Score's personality, he's someone that a lot of people respect because he leads by example, but he's also a very, like, affable person. Which means that he's probably not going to be like if you watch player cams, he's always talking, but he's not like screaming like Mata. Like if you look at Mata, he's usually kind of very loud.
No, I'm sure he's just going around going like,
again, like maybe LS can attest to that more, but like what I've seen and what little I know from players about Score's personality is that he's someone that like a ton of players respect a great deal. Like they respect what he has to say, and what he has to say is very smart and he's a very intelligent person, but he is also an affable person where he might not want to like run over someone else in comms. But that, again, a lot of that is speculation from my part as well.
Think about it logically. In the past teams he had, where, by the way, like he was the fucking team half the time in the old KT roster lineups, everyone just automatically listens to him. Like that's you have to, and not only that, he's doing a killer job. But in that scenario, maybe he doesn't have to be super forceful because it's just set up around him. Whereas you look at this team, I could believe exactly that he's just given his comms, and then it's just part of the mix, and then he's like, okay, guys, right, I've secured this right here. I'm going to come topside, and we can get. No, that's okay. You can just go in without me. You've done. Right, new plan. I'm just going to go around here now. I'm going to put a ward for you later. So later on, don't let me gank you again. I'm going to go down now, and I'm going to come and pawn. You've gone in again, haven't you?
These comps would be terrible.
That's cool. That's okay. Yep, we'll work through that. I'm coming back now. Right, I'm going to fucking hell. At what point in time do you just snap and start just throwing bottles at people's heads or something? I don't know. Probably just need to get a bit drunk or something. Right, here's the question then. With where we are in the league right now, as I applied before, we'll get to this in a minute, as you alluded to, but it's a shit show right now. Every motherfucker's losing games. So even so, this is the question for both of you. So LS, you first. Even with all of KT's flaws, could they end up being the best team in the league?
That's hard. I think it's between them and Kingzone at the end of the day. I think... Oh, man. I think overall, Kingzone, their ceiling is higher. But I think KT can get first. Best team overall, if Kingzone doesn't hit their ceiling, sure. I don't like the KSV hype, by the way. I'm not behind that.
We'll get to that.
Yeah.
We'll get to that. Emily, what do you think? What I'm basically saying is, yes, clearly KT is flawed, but the entire league looks flawed right now. So can that still be enough where on the trajectory they're on now, they can end up the best team?
I still think Kingzone is actually going to be the best team. Because I think we've kind of alluded to this before, but when you have, so KT is still having some of the same issues that they did previously for whatever reason with these 5 superstar players. You and I have spoken about this before previously. I think it was on the Worlds thing for Narrative Week.
Okay.
But basically when you have a team where there are certain players who fit a specific role really well and then they have other weaknesses, it's sometimes easier to design how your team's going to work around that. And from what I saw from, they did put Cousin, but also I thought Peanut and BDD were communicating a lot better this week. I think Kingzone is still going to be top team.
Okay. Well, then we'll get to that next then, because obviously, as you alluded to, we need to talk about KSV, because KSV came in with all the hype of being the world champions. Obviously, they are in a scenario where they kept the same lineup exactly. They even obviously won that opening A game against Kingzone. Admittedly, yes, Kingzone didn't have Khan in the game. And so I know a lot of people out there were thinking to themselves, SK Telecom and KT are fucking up, but it's cool because Kingzone and KSV are going to be really solid anyway. How has KSV lost to what was supposed to be the worst team in the fucking league?
So what
That's
I
MVP.
thought... Yeah, MVP is still the worst. But what I thought from the Kongdoo series is that they kind of were supposed to be worse than MVP because they also didn't change their roster, but it was worse on paper. With easy to execute team compositions, here, I'll use an example that LS uses all the time when he's doing coaching, right? What does he tell people to play mid? He tells them to play Annie because you can play Annie, It's not super complicated. Yeah, exactly. So you look at what Kongdoo did, and I think Papa Smithy was calling it the bouncy castle with J4, Galio, Vladimir, and then in the second game with Zach, Zoe, and Gangplank, and then they have Ezreal, Alistar, both games. And so you look at these comps and you're like, okay, well, Kongdoo has to do is just if they get the team fight, no one's going anywhere,
exactly.
And it's not hard to have a Galio coming in with a J4 and a Vladimir. It's not difficult to execute. And I think that's what Kongdoo did really well, is that they communicated well. They got the team fights they wanted against KSV. And I also think, just based on what I saw from KSV last night against MVP, they are going to have to watch out for their early game if they go up against a really good jungler, because I thought Beyond actually had a really good early game against KSV last night. And even though they lost, even though MVP lost, I think that's something that KSV still need to look out for. But as for how Kongdoo won, I think they had a really good game plan going in, and they were like, we're not necessarily going to worry about KSV, but we're going to worry about ourselves. And we're going to pick these like easy to execute team compositions where we don't have to, we don't have to necessarily deal with some of the things that KSV does better than we do.
So what does this tell us about KSV though?
So they played Haru both games, and I actually thought like Haru had a really good early game in game 2 especially. But I do think that without I know people keep saying it and they want to have Haru because he's a lot more aggressive of an early game jungler, especially if they have the push mid. Like Crown has the push mid, Haru goes in and he is really good at obliterating his jungle opponents. Like he actually had a really good read on Raze in game 2 of Kongdoo. But I still think in the late game, when it comes down to what you think of KSV as a team, which is really strong Baron setups and really strong late game team fighting, I still think they are they're like here with Haru still, and then like here with Ambition still. And so I think that the trade-off is obviously like what I spoke to with Beyond versus Ambition last night. You might have a little bit of a trade-off in the early game, but I still think that KSV is really reliant on his leadership in game for what they want to do.
Okay. So LS, the problem I have with the KSV hype is, right, okay, winning Worlds should have been the zenith of them as a team. Like, wow, you won Worlds. Even winning Worlds had that first week that was complete ass from them. Like, they were so bad that first week in the playoffs, in the group stage, right? That was the one where they almost lost to Fenerbahce in one of the games. So, like, this was not a team, even in their best, that didn't have flaws. They still had times when they were... Now, yes, they got it together for all the playoff series. They did their prep. They came up with the right game plan. Players played well. What aren't you liking about this team? Because obviously you set it up there that you don't really see them as a team that's going to win, right?
No, I mean, I've always liked Samsung. I mean, I was one of the main vocal supporters of Crown for a while. I know that you personally, right, got a lot of flack for your tweet saying that the Samsung roster would never make another Worlds or something, right? And then people gave you a ton of shit after they won Worlds. Shouldn't have won Worlds. I mean, like it's ridiculous. I mean, you look at how the brackets went. Longzhu got knocked out. SKT wasn't actually looking that great even at Worlds. And then Samsung, yeah, they still had their late game team fight. I mean, that's what they had, right? But they had it because everyone else was bad, not because they were spectacular at it. Like, I guess that's a weird metric. Like, they're good at late game team fighting. They're good at stalling games. They're good at getting to that stage. And then because people aren't practiced in that area, they could muster up wins. And then Crown, I think, was fantastic. I think that Ruler was good. And now, like, looking at the current KSV, even talking about the series that they lost versus Kongdoo, I mean, I didn't watch those games. I just took a look at the drafts really quick. I mean, those drafts are fucking Annie on paper. It's pretty hard to fuck up if you're Kongdoo. And it's also really difficult looking at them for KSV to do something. It's almost like they have to get edges in each game. This is something that's plaguing all the regions right now, and I think it's just actually a byproduct of the meta. Just pound for pound, it's like you look at KSV and it's like that new character that's like entered into an anime or a show that suddenly has to be like a side protagonist, but no one really likes them, but the writers keep forcing them anyway. Like, that's exactly what KSV is to me right now. It's someone that's like being forced upon us and we don't want them, but they're here. But it's like, realistically, it should just go Kingzone, KT, and then KSV, simply because they're like a neo SKT, in the sense that overall their coordination is better than current SKT. They have Crown, so it's like neo Faker in a way for them, and then at least they have their fucking shit together. And Crown doesn't look like a chicken with his head cut off if his teammates are inting him. So they're neo SKT to me. That's what it looks like. But if SKT gets their shit together, or if Jin Air continues to improve or stuff, there's lots of stuff sprinkled across the league that can really just like mix up the league. And and add a lot of problems. But I don't know. I don't like the KSV hype. I don't see them coming close to toppling KT or Kingzone just further down the line. I think that their ceiling has basically been reached. Not completely, but they can't go as far as KT or Kingzone can.
Emily, what do you think of a KSV?
I actually think Ruler is performing really well right now, which is something that's really big for them, and that is something that when you asked me in the first episode of the show you were like, okay, well, who on this KSV lineup would you like to see, really step out as like this super strong carry? And I actually think Ruler has performed really, really well so far. So I think if KSV are going to continue to improve, they need to figure out whatever their shot calling issues are with Haru, because I actually do think the team plays better around his early game than what I've seen with them with Ambition and Ambition's early game. But then I also think that in this meta, the fact that Ruler is playing super well is very good for them. So that and their team fighting should keep them above the middle of the pack teams for now, because those teams are all teams that have like question marks in one or two like really specific areas, whereas KSV, they've played together. I think they know fairly well what they want to do in game, even if it is just sitting back and waiting for a late game team fight. So if every team is playing like up to their highest level, I think there's a chance that you could see some of those mid-tier teams knock KSV down a bit further. And that's assuming that like Kingzone and KT are playing at,
where they should
what they could do.
It should be mentioned that the meta right now is also beautiful for KSV. No one gets to do anything. It's a boring, just, pathetic slugfest thing. It really is KSV's like meta right now. So when the meta shifts up, if stuff starts to become more problematic in top lane, the jungler meta shifts, or bottom lane gets more chaotic and there's more opportunity, I think that they begin to experience more problems, to be completely honest.
Like, is KSV, for example, let me see. So they already played Jin Air, that was week 1, but they lost a game to Afreeca Freaks, but they haven't yet played.
Afreeca should have won that series too.
They haven't yet played Barbecue. Let me see, when did they play them? Looks like not for a while actually. Looks like week 6 maybe. No,
they played them this week.
Week
KSV.
3. They play them.
Right.
Yeah, they play BBQ this week.
Do you think BBQ can beat KSV?
Can they? Yes. Will they? I don't know.
I don't think they will. There's the potential for them to, but my problem with BBQ is we see them improving, right? Or in my opinion, they've improved since the beginning of the split with integrating Ignar and Trick. But I still think they're like still ramping up. So since they're meeting KSV this early, I still think KSV would have the edge in that matchup. But I think BBQ is that team, right? We're all looking at and we're like, okay, this team obviously has a very high, like they have super high potential in terms of what they can do if the team comes together. And we're slowly seeing them start to come together, in my opinion, after this week. So I think meeting this early right now, though, KSV has the edge in that matchup.
I think week 4 through 6 is basically KSV's gauntlet. And I think it gives us a really good idea of where they're going to be. Because week 6 is when the meta is going to be really shaken up, and that's when they collide with Afreeca. So that'll be really good. And then we also get to see how they're going to fare off against a crippled SK Telecom. It's like Goku when he has the virus. I had to throw one in there for you, Thorin.
All right, fair enough.
I had to give you one.
Okay. So, what about this then? Let's just do Kingzone then. So Kingzone at the moment just look like the de facto number one team, right?
Yeah. I think anyone that says otherwise is an idiot.
Like, I actually think that's what's depressing right now. Here's the thing. I agree that, like, on paper, they should be the best team. Like, that looks like a great lineup on paper. Every factor's there. This actually bizarrely, this looks like one of the worst splits of LCK I've ever seen. It's the only one I've ever seen where even, like, the elite teams have, like, glaring flaws and yet still win the games despite even showing those flaws, you know. Like, normally you hope that it's where, like, right, okay, if the number one team fucks up in this way, the number two or number 2, 3, and 3 beats them. But it's like at the moment, that doesn't even necessarily happen. And like, this has to be the worst ever time. Because normally, when you do, as the show's title suggests, whoever's number one in Korea is technically number one in the world. That's the assumption you should have. Well, this has to be the weakest we've ever had a number one. Like, go to any past season. Obviously, think of SK Telecom teams when Rock's Tigers were super good. These teams were fucking amazing when they were on top.
Yeah. Well, I don't think Kingzone and KT being at second, third is that problematic. I mean, they're about to steal it away from KSV. I mean, that's the way that I'm looking at it, realistically. So they're about to take back the title. Kingzone.
I think that the other problem is this meta is kind of.
The meta is very bland. Yes.
Yeah.
It's really bland, and I think that's actually hitting Korea in a lot of ways. But Kingzone,
no, go. I was just gonna say, like, Korean teams will always play to minimize mistakes, right? So, like, in a meta like this, you are going to have two teams sitting back for however many minutes because of that reason. So,
yeah. But I mean, Kingzone, like the David versus Goliath game. I mean, if you put KT in that spot or KSV, they're not gonna do what Kingzone did. Just because they don't have Khan. So I mean, Khan was a core piece of that. The way that he was just able to apply so much pressure and demand so much attention. I mean, Khan's a pretty unique factor right now, in a way for Kingzone too, because he's a player that can resist the meta. In a way, regardless of how it's going to be. And I think that really mixes things up for Korea, especially when trying to, like, approach Kingzone. And I mean, I think that their roster on paper, I really do think it's stronger than KT across the board, like player for player, ever so slightly stronger than KT. Okay. I'm not worried about Kingzone. And then because they have, like, I just feel like they have more to prove than KT. Some people might be like, no, KT has more to prove, right? They have to win a championship, blah, blah, blah. No, Deft is sitting on bank. Mada's sitting on bank. Yes, they came back to Korea and everything. Score's been regarded as one of the best since forever. Smeb has been regarded as one of the best since forever. I feel like Kingzone's players are probably more hungry. So I don't know. Just watching them play, going back to what I said about the skill ceiling, I think Kingzone's prime is still ahead of them. Okay. So I'm looking forward to it. And then if the meta does get mixed up to where there is more aggression and there's more volatility, I think that Khan just comes online even more.
So I think Emily, it's also... Yep. Oh, no, I was going to say, so dovetailing on that, it's also super important to note that Kingzone's bot lane right now is tied up because bot lane is awful. Yeah. And I still have an incredible amount of, like, respect. I think that bot lane is fantastic. And I also think if the meta shifts to a point where you can see Gorilla roaming more and affecting the map, or them being able to initiate some bloodier trades in bot lane early because both Gorilla and Prey have phenomenal initiation sense, I think that also helps Kingzone significantly once we come out of this, like, double Relic Shield overheal, do nothing for the first 10 minutes of the game. Because I think that they are two players that, while when you look at Kingzone, they're not, like, maybe the flashiest early, but I think unlocking Gorilla and Prey from this meta will also serve Kingzone very well.
So when they brought in Peanut, who himself, obviously, we know he's a good player, but he obviously didn't fit with SK Telecom. Meanwhile, the jungle spot's obviously been questionable for Kingzone anyway, and they have all these amazing players in all the different positions. It seemed like it should be a perfect marriage. Now, yes, he's had his teething problems, But the fact that they've brought Cuz into the team twice since Peanut is back is like, how fucking dare you, sir? What are you trying to do right now? What kind of message are you sending right now? Like, what? Is Cuz back there fucking watching the games? Is he like scouting the enemy's path or something? No, he isn't. He's probably trying to fucking bang a square peg through a round hole. Like, I play. It's like, fucking hell. Like, why do you think they've been subbing Cuz back in? Do you have any theory why? Has Peanut been that bad?
I don't think Peanut's been that bad. I mean, they subbed him in twice, against Afreeca
SK Telecom
and against
and Afreeca,
SKT. Yeah. I think the thing with Cuz possibly has more to do with him and BDD. Like, if you noted, they had the Nidalee game with Cuz, which like made me really sad because you sub out Peanut and then you have Cuz play Nidalee. But I think to what I spoke to last week, I think it has a lot more to do with BDD being comfortable, because Peanut and BDD are very obviously still working out their play style together. That's the only thing I can guess. Even though I honestly thought BDD and Peanut this week were much improved. That a lot of that does have to do with the fact that they obviously have more pressure topside. So with pressure topside in this meta, it's actually like super, super important because nothing's happening in bot lane for forever. So, but I thought like they had one mid lane play with BDD and Peanut while BDD was on Rise, I believe, that was really smart in exploiting the mid lane against SKT. I think it was SKT game 1. To get advantages there. So I thought Peanut and BDD looked significantly more in sync this past week. So I can't speak to why they substituted Cuz in, but the only thing I can think of is because Cuz and BDD are just so used to playing together. But I honestly have no insight to that because, like I said, I thought Peanut and BDD looked better this week together.
Okay, so here's the thing, LS. Now's your chance to get all the plaudits, okay? Because it is true. I went back and I watched the video you linked. Like a year ago, you did actually pick Teddy as one of the players to like watch out for, and like if someone who's really good, due to the mechanics and such, which is obviously one of your main points of emphasis. But here's the thing that's exciting right now, LS, is that with so many of the top teams having all these problems and some of their players being underwhelming, literally, the MVP of the LCK might be in fucking Jin Air. What do you think of this? That's not even ridiculous, is it?
No, it's not. I think Teddy is just fantastic. I mean, last year I called him a top 5 ADC in the world, and I said that if I would have said that, people would have been like, "No, you're an idiot." I think he's probably the best in Korea individually right now. Right, then I know that's like a stretch, probably for some people, right? They just can't get over their hump of Bang or Deft or whatever else.
I mean, just listen, guys, just watch some of these SK Telecom games.
Yeah, just watch
that Bang shit real.
I would put him and Ruler up there. I put him like slightly above Ruler as the best performing ADC.
Okay. Yeah, Teddy is just fantastic, and I mean it's been pretty obvious to see for over a year. It's been like a year and a half that you could see that Teddy was just insane. But the thing is like how many people were looking for it, number one, right? Because who the fuck's looking at Jin Air? And then number two is how many people are like identifying the hurdles that he's being put into and the opportunities he's creating for himself. Because that's the big thing to do is like, do you create your own opportunities? Because very few ADCs do. Most of them just like ride on the coattails of mid or top laners, or they do what's needed of them, etc. But Teddy, like, fucking, he finds the needles in the haystack, and then he still just needles people. I mean, yeah, he's fantastic. I do agree with you that the MVP currently, towards the end of the split, I still have the King Khan. I'm still riding that, but I think it's probably going to be between him and Khan.
Okay, what do you think, Emily? Because, I mean, as you kind of said, like, they know that, like, as we say in English, they know which way their bread's buttered. Like, they know that he's the star player. They set him up to be the star player. They give him everything he needs to be the star player. I mean, I'm sure if I was someone in KT Rolster, I won't say who, I'd be like, are you seeing what they're doing? I am the fucking Teddy of this team. I am the Teddy now, bitch. Just one of those things I always wanted to say. There's no reason to even say that, right? Okay, come on. What do you think, Emily? What are your thoughts?
I think where Jin Air are going to run into problems is when mid lane becomes more important. Like I said previously, just because Justice and Grace are both new, and I haven't seen anything out of either of them that has been. I think they both will improve, but I think that could be a major issue for Jin Air once the meta shifts and mid becomes slightly more important as like a carry position rather than this like control. Because right now, like mid lane, you look at it and it's about wave clear and about mid jungle synergy and about controlling the mid so that because nothing's happening bot, so you can either get advantages in jungle or you can get advantages topside early, and hopefully win the game that way. But I think that's going to be Jin Air's major issue. I do think I want to see more of, again, like Teddy can take care of himself in the bot lane. So I also want to see a world where we might see Wraith roaming around a bit more, because alternatively, you could also see Jin Air continue to improve with Teddy as their main carry, but then Wraith unlocked, because I've always described him as like a jungler's support, based on his roaming patterns, especially when he was paired up with Ambition. So, and Ambition's like early jungling days. So, but I think Teddy is like if you are frustrated with the meta, or if you're frustrated with like games, maybe you're like, people aren't doing anything, this is super boring, like just watch Teddy highlights from his games, because he's just so good. Like it makes you excited to watch the game, to watch him in a team fight and what he can do in a team fight.
No, what's great as well is there's a weird way where sometimes I actually hope for players like him to be in a situation like this, because the problem is if you're on a really good team, sometimes you can have games where you win and you didn't have to do that much, or you weren't the player that was going off, so they just kind of like, you just chill and you win the game anyway. He's in that scenario where like he's part of like a fucking bank robbing crew, and they're holed up. The police have got them completely surrounded. Like they're shouting on the speakerphone, "We've got you completely surrounded. We have air support and snipers on the roof, and we have men coming in through the sewers. Give up now, and we'll send you to prison." And then his gang's already decided they're not giving up anyway. So the police is coming in. You're never going to like shoot all the cops. You're not going to shoot like 50 cops. But he's just that like straight baller guy who's like, I'm just going to take a couple of these motherfuckers with me though. And he's just rolling around. Fucking, I just imagine him like McCree out of Overwatch, just rolling around, throwing flashbang someone's face, capping that motherfucker, getting everyone else, and he's going to die in the end. He plays with Jin Air, and he's not going to win all the games, but at least he's going to give it a fucking try. It's sick. I love watching people carry like that, especially because you only have to go back a month or something, no, like 2 months ago, and on every episode of Narrative Wake, everyone's like, being as I am in a fucking blood contract to never criticise Bjergsen, I must claim that nobody in the game League of Legends can carry as a star individual player. Well, guess what? You can if you're a fucking AD carry on Jin Air, apparently. So, maybe that's the career move for Bjergsen then. Go to Jin Air, motherfucker.
Oh, man.
So, okay, then there's one more team we need to talk about, because all the rest are just irrelevant anyway. So the one more team we need to talk about is Afreeca Freaks, because we only touched on them briefly there. So, Afreeca, right, LS, give us the fresh take. What do you think about this team?
I don't even know what to think about Afreeca. Afreeca is the wild card to me. They really are. They're just the giant wild card. I mean, they picked up Keen, and there was a lot of teams gunning for Keen in the offseason. I know that to be a fact.
Obviously SK Telecom was like, we're good. We got our team. We don't need anyone good. What, Teddy?
Yeah, how did they not go after Keen, actually? That is like bizarre.
Because you have to understand, Emily, right? Because they got to the final of Worlds with a team that was even breaking down, Koma literally, his ego had gotten so great. His hubris was so great. He was like, He was literally like, I could coach anyone to the fucking LCK title. And they were like, come on, not anyone, surely. He was like, nah, fuck it. I'll pick up people from solo queue who aren't even considered like the best in solo queue. I'll take them as well. I'll make Wolf into a jungler. And then they're like, this is madness. What are you doing? He was like, I am SK Telecom. He was like fucking Emperor Palpatine at the end of like Revenge of the Sith or whatever. That's how far this motherfucker's gone. And guess what? You can't do all that shit. You actually need good players in League of Legends. Coach doesn't play the game, bro. He just coaches, doesn't he? Come on. It's mental, isn't it? It's like playing golf. He's trying to give himself a handicap of 5 or something. I mean, I would make a joke there, like his handicap isn't quite 5. But anyway, you see where I was going with that one, right? Come on. Yeah. What do you think of Afreeca then? Come on.
So I've been outspoken of how much I kind of want to see this team succeed because I like a lot of their moving parts, and I think I really liked Keen coming into this split. Like before he was even picked up by Afreeca, he was one of the players that I wanted people to watch out for and be like, hey, like think about this guy, like he's pretty good. But I think, that KSV match was just, so like discounting game 3 where they basically just their mental was just shattered after game 2. With Afreeca, for me, it comes down to like really slight errors that cost them the game. So like you can look at a lot of things from that game 2 against KSV and say like, here's where they could have set up for this objective a lot better. Here's where they could have leveraged pressure that they had here a lot better. Here are like individual micro mistakes they made in this team fight that led to them getting aced. And then Samsung running it, or not, KSV running it back down, right? So it's like, it's kind of like what I said previously about BBQ, where I want to see this team continue to improve throughout the split, because I do think Keen is a great addition, and I think this team can be super good. It's just about, can they get in and can they fix those mistakes they made as a team? Just discounting game 3 completely, because obviously, like, that was just, you know what, like, I'm not going to necessarily forgive them for it, but I can understand how your mentality would be shattered after losing that game too.
Being as they play at the end of this week, SK Telecom, and this episode will be out by the time that match happens, do you think that they can upset SK Telecom?
Yes.
Okay, in what way? What about their team would allow them to match up with SKT?
I mean, I think so. There are a couple of different ways. I think that if they play the early game around Spirit really well and focus topside, that's probably my, like, if I'm looking at how this team can most easily win, I guess, that'd be what I would be looking for, right? Like, exploit the jungle and exploit topside, because I do think the shortcut, I said this previously too, last episode, I believe, I think the shortcut to beating SKT right now is doing just that. Like, because topside is so important, because we're still on 8.1, just focus getting advantages there. That would be my, like, simple blueprint for Afreeca to go.
What do you think, LS?
I think that they can beat them, and I also agree that it does come from around the top half of the map. Just because, like Emily just said, we are still on 8.1, we're not on 8.2 yet. I mean, Afreeca versus basically, they're going to be facing, I think, a worse version of KSV.
In SKT?
I mean, that's the way that, yeah, that's what SKT is right now. They're a shell of KSV in a way. Interestingly enough, I think that if SKT and KSV collide, though, those two styles colliding, I think it's an entirely different dynamic in itself. So that matchup will be interesting. But I think that Afreeca, realistically, even worst case scenario, if nothing ends up going right, I think that they're just facing a worse version of KSV. Just like how the games will go and how they'll play out. And then it just reaches a stage where SKT won't be as coordinated, which is one of the worst, that's just the weirdest thing to say.
That's so sad to say.
Yeah, it is.
So sad to say.
Okay. To end the episode then, let's do this. It's all well and good now reminding people that you did indeed pick a player and they did well, blah, 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 etc., right? Give me one now at LS. Who's the next Teddy? Who's the next player that people aren't looking at necessarily, but this guy's got potential, or he's got sick mechanics and he's just under the radar and he's on not a good team, and you'd pick this as like the next guy to come through. Who'd you pick?
I haven't watched enough games yet. I can't do that. I'll give you a tweet. So I'll give you a tweet on February 7th.
Okay. Emily, do you have someone?
Very specific.
Do you have someone
a week from today?
I was gonna default to him because I know he watches a lot more solo queue than I do. That's like my one. I would say that's my like main weakness, I guess, in terms of scouting players, is that I don't watch enough Korean solo queue.
LS. Well, not in LCK then. Is there someone who's in solo queue at the moment so insane everyone's like, this guy's got to be the next really good player, or he's some rising up and we should watch out for?
Solo queue right now is like a dumpster fire. So it's pretty hard. Like, a lot of players are very angry and complaining, and it's pretty difficult to measure or really determine like who is going on right now. I think in recent months there was like his ID just disappeared, and not like banned or anything like that. There was a mid laner who had started coming up. It was like 500 LP. I don't know his ID off the top of my head. It's like a Korean ID. But I remember that a lot of people were impressed by him, and then when I watched his gameplay, it was also impressive because it just looked very mechanical. But at this time, I don't know. I don't think that there's a con on the horizon. Not right now, anyway. We'll probably get like one of those a year.
What do you think of aiming? Only because I've heard a lot of people hyping him out of solo queue.
He got kicked off.
Yeah, he's on Afreeca now.
Yeah, he's on Afreeca now, but he got kicked off SKT for like mana problems. I'm 99% sure on that. He got removed for mana problems.
I was wondering just because I know a lot of people hyped him up mechanically.
Yeah, no, mechanically that's what he has going for him, but I mean he's dumb as shit. Like, God, I was about to like reference him to a player. Yeah, that's what you think, but I don't know. See, now I can't even like refer him to a player. People are going to take it too toxic. But like, he's mechanically good, but he's not stellar. But then just because he has no brain, like he's not cerebral with his gameplay, so nothing impressive.
Okay.
So I don't know. I mean, he's been around for a while too. I don't know if there's another con in solo queue. I haven't been looking for one. I've been so preoccupied with other stuff.
I've created a Patreon, so if you're interested and able to support my work financially, then check out the link in the description box below and become a part of the Skrilluminati today.